All right, y'all. We're back. This is episode 5 of
Cinco.
Wooed Up Season 1. Welcome.
Where spirituality meets reality.
Where spirituality meets reality.
And we're going there today.
We are going there today. We're going to be talking about some deep, nitty-gritty woo-woo stuff. So be prepared, buckle up, because we's going on an adventure.
A big old mighty adventure.
A big old adventure. But first,
yes,
before we get started, we are so excited to say that this episode is kindly sponsored by Muted Studios
in Austin, Texas. We are so grateful to them for all of this time, this space, this equipment. And this is how we're looking so good, sounding so good.
So if you are interested in booking a session, we will link their information below. And we will ensure that we, share this beauty in this space that Brian and Ben have created for us. If you want to get a little bit of this goodness too.
If you want to look and sound this good.
If you want to look and sound this good.
Henny.
Okay,
so on this episode 5, we're talking about the retreat that we just came back from, the Reborn retreat, which was hosted in Tulum, Mexico by my coach, Sol. And it was a, 4-day retreat?
Yes.
In this beautiful villa at the Dora campus.
Yes, shout out Dora. Thank you so much for opening your space to us. It was absolutely magical. But sorry, Tiffany, continue.
No. We got to give all the shout outs. We had Paula and her team.
Paula! I still want that uniform, Paula.
We'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be
for
back.
sure. It was in the middle of the jungle. It was so beautiful. So many animals. I mean, like butterflies, yellow-bellied birds, hummingbirds. There was what was that one little raccoony thing?
Yeah, that looked like a possum / I don't know why I keep wanting to say capybara.
I know you do. Probably something like that. But I have such a connection to animals, so that really meant a lot to me. I get a lot of my spiritual messages, especially while meditating, through animals and my connection to earth. So it was really beautiful to be a part of that and to see and to learn of new animals that I've never seen before. And we ate some delicious food from the land. It was so clean.
All fresh, organic. The juice was freshly squeezed. There was no sugars, no fakeness, no preservatives. It was all just good stuff, and all of the guacamole in the world that we could manifest.
We really did too. Bringing 10 of us together, and every time we'd be like, "What do we want for dinner tonight?" And we would be like, "Always guacamole,
always
totopos,
always." And just the pan just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger every time.
Literally, the last time you're like, "I want the most guac we've had," and it was just a bread pan
of all guacamole. It was fabulous.
It was.
It was just such a beautiful time, and we think it's so important to really talk about that experience in great detail, to talk about everything that occurred, not only during that experience, but also leading up to that experience as well, because it took us for a ride.
Deep. It took us deep. And, you go on a retreat and you're like, okay, this is going to be beautiful, connect with other women, do some healing. And I provided a workshop of goddess yoga for one morning. So it was I hoped that I helped people in that modality. It's always when you're doing this work, you're like, if I could just touch one person.
Exactly.
So leading into the retreat, we definitely set intentions of what we were hoping for.
Yes.
Most of which I just named, helping others heal and guiding others and whatever I brought, but also healing alongside other women and just connecting deep with Mother Earth, that location, other women. What's funny, girl?
Because you said connecting deep, and we showed it.
And that's the thing is coming out on the other end, I had no clue.
Yeah.
No clue what was going to happen.
Yeah.
You go for this 3D, on this earth healing.
Yeah.
You come out on the other side.
Yeah.
spiritually awakened
Mm-hmm.
further than before, really, honestly, is what happened.
Yeah.
And I didn't even wish for that. But I know our talks before going on the retreat, we really asked kind of openly whatever it is that we need in our highest good.
Mm-hmm.
And up leveling is what we got, honey.
Absolutely. It was just a profound experience. And to think on the level of like spiritual awakening that we received and experienced was just like truly otherworldly. There was so much that I asked for in this experience that I don't think I realized what it was I was asking for, but I literally got everything that I asked for and then some. So I'm looking forward to us really diving deep into our intentions behind this experience, how everything led up prior to, and then also the during. And then we'll cut to episode 6 with the after and where we are now on the other side of it all. So it'll technically be 2 full hours of diving into this experience. And I highly suggest that you listen to every single second of it because it gets deep and it gets wild and it's raw and it's pure and it's a little intense, but it's our experience and we definitely feel very called to share it.
And it's also, it's Thursday. We got back on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
So the 6th episode is really going to be all about us and our integration back into just real life and the 3D world and the working and just the going about life and kind of how we brought those things from the retreat into this world. And it's only been like 3 days. So we're still in it. We're still going through it.
Very much so.
But I want to know more about your intentions that you set personally that maybe you didn't end up sharing with me or you eventually did share with the group going into this retreat. What were you looking for?
Yeah, it's funny because I don't think I really initially knew what the theme behind this retreat was. All I knew, Tiffany was like, "Hey girl, my coach is created this retreat. I've worked with Soul once prior and we had a very, very intense breakthrough session. So shout out to Soul. We'll tag her information in this podcast as well. She's incredible. If you're interested in working with her or learning more about her and her work, we definitely want to make sure that you guys have access to her as well. But I'd worked with her once before and had a very powerful session. And then of course, you were co-hosting and offering Goddess Yoga. And I heard it was in Tulum and that's all I needed to hear. You can catch me on the beach any day, honey. So, I knew that it was going to be like a deeply spiritual experience. I knew that, there was going to be some crying. There was going to be some emotional release, that there was going to be, some movement. And I hoped for all of that. I truly felt deeply connected with healing some ancestral lineage within myself and within all of the other incredible women that had come before me. I didn't know necessarily what that meant, and I didn't know necessarily how I was going to experience that, but that was definitely huge for me. I also really wanted to ensure that when I returned from this retreat, I returned having left behind a lot of old perspectives and beliefs that I had about myself, about the world, about my life, and really just wanted to come out on the other side as a different person, to truly be able to step into my full identity in this work that it is that you and I do. And I got all of that and then some. I got all of that and then some. I feel as though at times I definitely have a very deep awareness or inner knowing of things that are going to happen, maybe that haven't happened yet, or just, being able to trust and believe that something is or isn't, or right or wrong, or yes or no. And I've been saying, I feel like for months now that, I knew that something big was going to happen in July. I didn't know what that was, but I knew that July was going to be big for both of us. Yeah. And then that was before I had even pulled the trigger on the retreat.
Right.
And so then when the retreat happened and financially, initially I wasn't even able to make that happen. Yeah. So when Soul, the coach, was like, "Kayla, I had a vision and you were there with us in Tulum," I was like, "Baby girl, unless you envision some money, coming into my bank account, then you was probably just asleep. That probably wasn't no vision. But then when, the universe and divine goodness happened to make a way for me to be able to go, big shout out to Tiffany for covering my flight there, because I wouldn't have gotten there without you, honey.
Shout out to Southwest Points.
Shout out to Southwest.
And my spending.
And racking up, spending the money in abundance. But it just seemed like so many things happened in alignment in a way that it was like, you're supposed to go, you're supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. And I'm very much so like, I trust into the universe, I surrender into the universe. So if something's meant for me, I know for a fact it will happen. Mm-hmm. So when things started shaking up and aligning for me to be there, I was like, okay, yeah, something big is going to happen on this retreat. Like, it's not just like, okay, July's a big month, but like this retreat specifically is going to be very powerful for us. I don't know how, and I don't know what's going to come from that, but I knew for a fact something huge was going to happen.
Yeah. And I feel like that is typically how you and I go, is you'll be like, I know this. And I'm like, oh, do you? Like, you do? Okay. But I've come to learn that your claircognizant, your inner knowing is so, like, it is true. Like, it is the truth. And so when you tell me, like, I know this, like, sometimes I'm like, okay. But like at this point in time, it's like, I just have to know. Like, I just have to like also know with you. It's just also like, if there's an inner knowing that you're telling me, then I also have that inner knowing. And it always plays out that way, straight up. And it did.
Very much so. So as far as the intention is concerned, was like really just surrendering to the process. I had my own idea of like, okay, well, this is what it is that I'm hoping to experience, but universe, I completely trust that whatever is meant to be will be, and whatever it is that you want for me to experience, I'll experience, and I will, walk into this experience with open heart, open mind, in every single capacity, so that I can just be a vessel for this experience. And before we even get into the experience, that was what I was feeling and thinking and hoping before I stepped into it. Which I feel like is kind of something similar to how it is that you were feeling for what it was that you were wanting to receive. I know that it was a little different because you were also not just experiencing the experience, but also facilitating the healing as well. So for you, I'm sure that was different. What was it that, fully encompassed what it is that you were looking for as you stepped foot into the retreat?
Yeah, I think I also didn't like really understand the theme of the retreat. Like I know it was called Reborn Retreat, but I was like, okay, like of course, like we're going to heal a little bit and come out like a better version of ourselves. I really just, I think like I mentioned, I just wanted to connect back with myself, my truth, heal whatever needed to be healed. So I could become the best version of myself for the next, level of myself, reaching my highest version, and connect with the women, and then also lead them in goddess yoga and coming back to who they are and loving themselves and allowing and guiding them to tap into their body. I think so many of us women are in our minds. And we can do a lot of healing in our minds, but a lot of the healing that I've noticed on my journey and for other women, especially ones that I've connected with through goddess yoga, the healing happens in the body. And we hold and store a lot of issues in our tissues. And a lot of that for women is in our hips. And of course, our heart center. And then a lot of us women have some trouble speaking our truths, unfortunately. So that's what goddess yoga really offers, and that's what I wanted to offer for the women there, for the portion that I was co-hosting. And so I just, if I could touch one woman that, into their growth or into a deepening of their healing, that's what I was looking for. And of course, always connection to the culture that I am embarking upon and the land, the new animals, all of that. Like that was my basic intention. Well, not really basic, but those were all my intentions. But I didn't really, I feel like you set some more concise intentions that I wasn't aware of. Mine were pretty general when it came to my being, besides the goddess and helping integrate that into the women's lives that were there on the retreat. That's really the only specificity that I had for my intentions. But I do know with one of your intentions you shared later on while in the retreat, that one of your intentions was to cleanse. And I remember you saying, I just wanted to cleanse. I didn't know how multifaceted that word to cleanse was, especially when you remove yourself from the 3D world and start to enter into the spiritual world and what that means for cleansing. So I just thought that was interesting that you had some specific intentions. Were there any other specific intentions like that? Like, to cleanse, I think is very specific, although you didn't get specific with it. You know?
Yeah. I think that, we have this general idea and notion of like, oh, I want to heal. But what is healing? What are you wanting to heal? How is it that you're wanting to heal? What does that look like? I did not have any idea. For me, it was more of like, I just want to heal. However it is I need to heal is healing. I just want to cleanse. There are so many different ways a person can be cleansed physically, mentally, emotionally. That can be a release of energy. That can be, a detoxification of your body and purging out, sweating out, toxins that aren't serving you anymore. That can be a cleansing and releasing of mindset and belief systems. So for me, I did feel prior to like, okay, there are some things that I have still that exist within me that I feel like need to go. And I don't know how else to let them go here right now in my current reality. And I feel as though if I call them into intention in this experience, that it will go. So for me, it was the cleansing, the healing most specifically of my ancestral lineage. So there are traumas that have definitely, as for all of us, trickled down through generation to generation. So whether that be patterns, habits, belief systems, those are all things that you'll see and notice in the 3D, but also energetically, for women especially, well, for all people, we existed in our mother's womb while our mothers existed in their mother's wombs, and so on and so forth. And so any experience that our mothers had, we too had as well, because we existed as eggs in their womb as they had those experiences, and so on and so forth on through the lineage. And one of the biggest things that I experienced through my session with Soul was healing a wounds that I've carried my whole life, a feeling of not enoughness, not worthiness, and recognizing that that wound actually wasn't mine. That was not my burden to carry. Never in my life has anyone ever made me feel like I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worthy, that I wasn't beautiful, that I wasn't kind, that I wasn't smart, that I wasn't an incredible person. Well, I mean, there's some traumas, into adulthood that I experience, as everyone does whenever they're, integrating and working with other people. But, my mom had told me about a time that one of my teachers, when I was in like kindergarten or something, had mentioned to her that, she's just reaching out for attention. Like she just doesn't feel like she's behaving as if she doesn't feel good about herself. And I was a child then. That's not something I have memory or recollection of. I remember having this conversation with my mom as I was like a young adult. But how at that age would I have felt that way when at that point in time I had all of my needs were met? My mother, she is the most loving woman in the whole wide world. And I am who I am because of her. And
shout out to Sweet Tea.
Shout out to Mama T. Every episode, you'll get that shout out. But, I always struggled with that through my adulthood. Like, why do I feel like not enough? Why do I feel not worthy? Why am I lacking my confidence? I can look at myself in the mirror and see that I'm beautiful. I can touch my heart and feel that I'm beautiful, that I'm a good person. I can look at my actions and how I show up in the world and know that I do try to be good every single day and love on people every single day of my life. So where is this feeling coming from? And through that session with Soul, I realized it was this feeling of not enoughness, whether that came from my mom's experience, whether that came from the experience in life of my grandmother, my great-grandmother, so on and so forth, who knows? But I know that through that experience, that there was energy that I was carrying that wasn't my own, that I was being called to heal. I also know that I've been called to connect in with my ancestors through a lot of messaging that I've been receiving through other spiritual leaders and healers. So I really just wanted to create the opportunity to tap into that and to see, if I put myself in a space where I'm just completely open and focused on receiving whatever messages that are meant to come through to me, what will I receive?
Yeah.
And just really ensure that I'm making myself available to having that connection to spirit and my spirit team, my ancestors, whomever wants to come into contact with me. So I think that those were my main focuses. Am I missing anything? I know you and I have talked so much about intentions behind everything.
Yeah, no, I feel like as much as you've shared with me and with the group that was on the retreat, I feel like those were the repeating themes of your intentions that you had set.
Right.
And it was wild because even though you didn't really know kind of like what the itinerary was or like what not the purpose, but the theme of the retreat was,
right.
When we slowly started to realize what was happening for each little modality or workshop that we were partaking in, it was like, oh, okay. And your intentions really were aligned with the healing that was happening on this retreat.
To a T.
Yeah. So I want to kind of dive into what actually took place on the retreat, like as far as what workshops and modalities were involved in this healing space and kind of what we got from, maybe what happened during the process.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Of those. And so
we can start with the first day.
Yeah. So the first day we had, of course, the opening circle where we tapped into kind of why we were there, again, what our intentions were. And I don't know if you want to speak more to that specifically or if you have more that you remember before the fire ceremony.
Yeah, no, I think that the fire ceremony is a great place to start.
Okay. So we had...
Or the opening ceremony, my apologies.
Oh, the opening ceremony?
The opening ceremony, most specifically, because that's when we had the opportunity to share pictures of our ancestors. And I think that was really, really big for a lot of the other women that were there. We won't really say names or specifics because that is not our story to share. But we will speak to a few moments that were very, very big and a lot of synchronicities that had occurred there. So specifically in the opening ceremony, the welcoming ceremony, it was very interesting to hear a lot of the women who had similar stories or had connections through certain things that happened to their ancestors that have then passed or intertwining connections. Like, for example, you and your grandmother with another young lady and was it her mother?
Her grandmother as well. Both of our grandmothers passed very young of ovarian cancer. And that retreat member was also going through a cancer recovery while at the retreat. She is healed now.
Yes, she is.
Aho. And
yes,
so that was really beautiful to kind of learn that just within the opening ceremony of, we brought these photos of these powerful women in our lives that changed our lives, that we both deeply miss, but we had that connection of what they went through, and then because they went through that, we also went through that. And so there was some profound connections happening between each and every one of us.
Yes, from the jump, from the very beginning. So that should have been our our warning of like, there's something magical in this space that's going to happen here.
Yeah.
So just in those moments of women being able to reflect and share and call upon any of their ancestors that had passed, me specifically, initially tapping into the relationship that I have with my mother and my grandmother, but of course calling into other family members that also needed that healing that we wanted to call in. So we did initially set the stage of like calling in those very, very important people, those very
Yeah.
important souls.
Yeah.
So that, I think, was a very beautiful and potent way to truly begin our experience before we actually got into the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing, was the fire ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we brought into the retreat each and every day these 2 shamans from what they call themselves as the ancestral roots.
Yes.
Right? And they were so powerful, so beautiful when they combine their gifts together. Just really created a space for us to enter into this safe healing with intention. And shout out to Frida and Carlos, because I know that they could have shown up and just taught us the traditions, but if they did not show up with the intentions, we would not have gone as deep as we did. No. Because it was profound and powerful.
In every single way.
Yeah. So they started us with a fire ceremony. So we were brought to a fire circle, and we were introduced to all of the different songs that they did, the different traditions that they did, and they created cacao for us, which is known for heart opening, to really start our weekend, to be able to connect to not only ourselves and open our hearts up, but to each other, and allowing, you know, kind of like breaking down that like outside barrier and allowing whatever is meant to happen, any connections that were meant to happen, to come forth. And we were standing in the fire pit.
We were standing in the fire pit.
It was hot.
It was hot.
Yeah.
We was all sweating.
Yeah.
The back of my legs was like, it's a little warm over here.
It really was. And it was out in the middle of the jungle, which was humid, but also just like, you know, we were meant to be in it and to feel it and to be present.
Yes.
And I remember they poured the cacao that they created, and he kept saying his mother's secret recipe, and I'm still not sure if that was true or not.
Yeah.
But we definitely know it was made with love.
Very much so.
Which is the most important ingredient with that. And so they had these beautiful traditional bowls that they poured that into, and we passed it all around. We blessed the cacao. We did a lot of dancing and drinking the cacao, and just like really connecting in with their traditional music and instruments. And yeah, that really was... Powerful. It was like a standing meditation. Yes. And just like the music made me go into another place, really. Because if you just closed your eyes and just touched base with the music that they were creating and the chants that they were saying, like I really, it felt surreal. Like I knew you guys were there, but I also was like, no, this is my time to drop in and to really touch base. And yeah, it was a really special moment for me. It was a drum circle as well, and I really connect to drums.
You do.
Drums are like my instrument. Not only I'll say this now, but not only in this lifetime because of things that I've experienced in my past with drums, but I think it's an ancestral thing. It's just like when I hear drums or a certain type of music, my body just has to move with it. It is like this inner calling. So I really resonated with that circle. But I actually wanted to rewind for a second because I remember before the retreat ever started, there was the 5 of us that showed up to the space, and I had done a little bit of a yoga.
Yes.
Leading a yoga session earlier in that morning for us 5. And we dropped into a quick meditation. And this will be important, I think, later on, is when we dropped into this meditation, I was sitting across from 2 other women on the retreat. And this vision of a jaguar came to me and was just pacing back and forth in front of me in kind of like this jungle background. And she would look at me and I would look at her, and I was like, I know you've got a message for me, as she does. She's come to me in prior, I would say this past year.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd be like, you're not ready. And I'm like, oh, I'm not ready for that message. Okay. Like, what is this message?
Yeah.
And so I remember dropping back into real life out of the meditation and looking at those two women and being like, did you all send me a jaguar? Was that you? And they're like, no, honey, I think that's your medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay. So just keeping that in mind. And then going forward, a little bit later that day, I think before the fire ceremony, she came to me again and she was like, you're ready. You're ready for this transformation. It's happening. And you're going to be transformed into kind of like this, not a fire being, but you are here to embrace your fire. You are here to not be afraid of your fire, because I was, as I've talked about on past episodes, I was such a fiery woman that I was what I would call an angry woman. And it was in an unhealthy way. So I was scared of that anger before. And up until this retreat, honestly, I was trying to learn how to slowly integrate that. But that having that message from that jaguar of like, you're meant to lead by fire and it's time for you to embrace that. And I got that download in the shower right before the fire ceremony, which will be important going throughout the retreat. But that's kind of what I experienced the first day of the retreat. And that's just the first day.
I remember watching you and you just looked so tapped in, very much so in your element and very like free of the world. It was almost like you were fully just like present in the moment. And I think that when we talk about presence and people are like, oh yeah, being present, being here, but it's like, no, what does it actually mean to be present? What does that actually feel like? What does that actually look like? And for you to just be in an element that you felt so comfortable in, that you felt so called to and so connected with, and it was just pure like divine connection. At least that's what I saw from you and how you were moving so comfortably in your experience. You very much so a fish in water, very much so in your element. So I knew that was going to hit for you, that modality. I was like, oh, this bitch loves some fire and she loves a little drum and we love cacao. So it was like, 3 things that are right up your alley. And you could definitely see that outside looking in.
Thank you for saying that, because it's so true. And it just like reminds me of my connection to you and how tapped in we are to each other. And just like you saying that literally just brought me back to that moment. And you're right. I was so tapped in. Like I was so present. It didn't matter what anyone saw me doing. Like I was there in that moment with me and connected. And it was really interesting also to be a part of a cacao ceremony traditionally, because we lead them. And so it was, I love to see it coming from another and kind of how they presented it as well.
Exactly. It was just so beautiful in its own way. It was magical. So I was very much so excited to be a part of that experience, just to be able to be supported and held instead of being on the other side of that. I love doing the supporting and the holding, but it's also beautiful for a healer to also, get a little bit of magic poured into them. So that was really exciting for me. But my experience was certainly a little bit different than yours, which will be the theme of this retreat for me. I was always... everyone else was over there and I was over there.
Going through it.
Yeah, everyone was like, oh, and I'm like, going through it. And the start of this experience is no different. I definitely did feel, like I was getting into it. We were calling upon the medicine of the sky, of the wind, of the this and of the that, and it was so beautiful, and the shell and the noise, the music, the sounds, like it was all just very profound. This is the whole spirit experience and starting it off. So I definitely felt grounded and tapped into that for sure. And then, just feeling like tapped into my body and I noticed that I've been doing a lot of swaying as we start talking about this as well, but I was just kind of just tapped in and swaying in the moment. And, then it was like my womb space started hurting so bad. It was like, not necessarily a feeling of cramps, but a feeling of like, if I could feel what my ovaries were, then those were hurting. And it wasn't just a dull pain. It was like, this is happening. This is happening right now. This is happening. This is happening. And then release for a little bit. And it was wild because, yes, it was very hot. It was very hot. And I was wearing this long dress. But really the only area of that was really getting like sweaty was like my belly area. And you could see that on my dress. And just the pain would kind of come and go. And I would just keep my hands on my womb space. And I had to sit down. A few times. And, just to kind of connect in. And I knew it was like, there's something not going on well with this. I want to heal this and I want this feeling to get better. But I know that like, that's not something I can do right now in this moment. Right now in this moment, I just need to experience this,
feel it,
and just sit with this, and also tap into know like, this is a real experience that's happening for me. Not like, okay, well, yeah, I had like a little stomach cramp and then, everything got better. It was very much like my mind going back to that and then coming back and then going back to that, coming back and going back. And so, as soon as the experience concluded, I was like one of the first people back into the villa. I was like, yeah, something's not right. I gotta go upstairs and sit with myself. And I did. I like changed out of my dress into something else. And I just immediately like got on the floor and like sat in like a bit of a child's pose and put my third eye to the ground and was just praying and just sitting there for a moment. And Soul even had walked in and all the lights were off and I was just hunched over and she was like, oh, are you okay? And I was like, I'm okay. Like, please go so I can continue to drop in and figure out what was going on, because I was just searching for a message or just to figure out like what was going on here. And it was crazy because in that moment, I immediately started thinking back to the beginning of this experience. And I believe it was in the opening ceremony, or the welcome ceremony with Soul. I had a few moments of these thoughts that would just pop up of like, why are you doing this? Like this isn't going to heal you. This isn't going to help you. What it is that you guys are doing here in this space, this isn't going to do anything for you. And it was very strange because it did not feel like those thoughts were my own. Like those aren't things that I would think. I, especially not, doing something as light, as like an opening, welcoming ceremony, especially being a practitioner and, facilitator and yoga teacher. And, I meditate and sound baths. Like these are all modalities that I know and love and am a part of literally on a daily basis. So it was very strange that I was having those thoughts coming to me. And in that moment, I even recognized like, I don't think that these are mine, but I was like, I'm just going to continue to stay tapped in and stay focused on what's going on here in this moment. So as I'm laying down, I'm recognizing like, okay, well, I was having those thoughts and that's weird. And then I was feeling tapped into my womb space and I was like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but I'm feeling as if like there has been some sort of very intense experience, whether it's something that I've experienced personally or whether it's someone down my family line has experienced, that was due to some sort of assault or something in some way. And it was weird because that's not something that I would think. That's not something that I would think in my mind or in my heart or even want to think about, So it was just weird that all of those things were coming to me while I was in that moment. And then I was thinking like, okay, well, has something happened? Something happened that to me, to someone else? And then like, okay, this is weird that I'm thinking these things. Like, I don't know what's going on. And then I was thinking like, just feeling into it and then just feeling this sense of darkness around me. And I was like, okay, something's not right. Like, I know I'm a little cuckoo, right? You got to be to live in this world.
You gotta be a little delulu.
You got to be a little delulu. But those experiences, I was like, okay, no. Something's not right. And I was literally in my mind praying. I'm like, Tiffany, if you can hear me right now, I need you. And I knew that was Delulu. I was like, bitch, I need you. Because I couldn't get up from that space. You were downstairs. I couldn't get up to the space. And next thing you know, boom, you walked through the door. And I was like, thank God. Thank God.
I had gone to get people's ancestral ancestors' photos from the original welcoming circle. And I came back in. I was like, where's my girl? And so I'm like, I'm going to go check on her because I remember seeing you in the circle and being like, she's just swaying side to side, eyes closed, holding her womb space, belly sweating, like only the belly sweating. It was really interesting. But I was like, she's going through it. And we'll talk about it later. Like, I know. Like, she's going through whatever she needs to be going through.
Right.
And you're standing, you're sitting. So I'm like, it's not like she's removing herself. So I'm like, she's good. Like, let her go through the process. And then I come upstairs and I see you just like hunched over. And you're like, I've been praying that you'd come up here. And I was like, what is going on? And yeah, that's the night that we had to call Pat in, right? Yeah. So
I was telling you a little bit about it. And I feel like, was I crying? Like,
no, you were just scared.
Yeah.
Like, you were just like, I don't understand.
Yeah. I was like, this is weird. I feel like I'm going crazy. Like, I remember saying that. Like, I feel like I'm going crazy. I feel like this sounds insane. And I need you to go get Soul. I need you to go get her because I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to make sense out of this right now. And then you go away and I'm just like, and then you come back with Pat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into like what was discussed with her but it's definitely like one of those things where whether it's your personal experience that you're healing from or your ancestors that you're healing from, either way, you have to heal from it. You have to process it. You have to feel it and you have to be with it because it's happening for a reason. And also you're ready for it to happen. So I know that was the beginning of your journey of like your cleanse that you had set an intention for. And I don't remember if we had experiences going to bed that evening.
I don't remember. I feel like that was that night. I feel like that was the night. That was the first night. And I know that, each night that there was something. I do know that for sure.
Yeah.
And, just speaking with Pat and just telling her about, what it was that I was feeling and her tapping into that. Pat also, for our listeners who don't know, she is a medium as well. She works in mediumship. So to have her there in her presence and for her to be able to like really see and recognize what I was going through was very it was very grounding because that energy that I felt like I was feeling, she was able to see and sense and just confirm that what I was experiencing was truly happening, was reality because, I felt like I was losing my mind. And it's funny because, someone can say that they're a medium and you're like, okay, cool, you're a medium, right? But it's different whenever you're sitting and having an experience that just like does not make sense, that is very different than your reality, that you think that you're losing your mind and going crazy, but you can also believe that other people have this gift and this experience. So why don't you feel like that you can have an experience where you can just sense darkness, like at minimum,
Yeah.
So just having that experience was, she helped me, we cleansed, and I felt immediately better.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
And that night, I feel like was the first night that I heard the knocking. I do believe that happened separately from the second night.
Oh.
Yes.
You do?
I do.
Oh.
I do because I just remember every single night something bigger just started happening.
Oh, you heard the knocking, but then the second night was like the doors closing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like somebody knocking on a door.
Exactly.
And then the door noises and then it opening.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly.
Girl.
I know.
Okay. So let's move forward to day 2.
Day 2. Well, we have to say day 1, that night, the knocking sound.
Yeah.
So that night, by the way, Tiffany and I are roomies because, of course, we really thought that we were going to be sleeping in a king size bed. cuddling with each other. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, but fortunately for Tiffany.
me.
Fortunately for Tiffany, we were in twin size mattresses, which I ain't been in a twin size mattress in a hot minute. I'm too much woman for that. I'm almost 6 feet tall, so that's a little bed for a lot of women. But that night in particular, I just remember us going to sleep, and I just remember hearing this knocking sound and just hearing and just like, what is that? And I remember like telling Tiffany, like, Tiffany, do you hear that? Do you hear that sound? Like, it sounds like a knocking or like a door opening. Like, it sounds like something. And you did hear it like towards the end,
Did
right?
I?
Yeah.
I don't remember this night.
Yeah.
Instance.
At the very end, you were like, no, Kayla, I don't hear it. And then I was like, Tiffany, do you hear it again? And you did. And that's when I got up and I went outside and I opened the door just to see if it was downstairs or whatever. And it stopped. And we didn't hear it the rest of that night.
Yeah.
And that was that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we went to bed.
I
slept well that night.
I slept well that night too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next morning
was
the Te Mescal.
Yeah.
Which was like a whole... I think that's what we were most fearful of.
Yeah.
You more so than myself. But it is a traditional sweat lodge, and it is made out of... I think it's like a clay or adobe, kind of look like a dome hut with one door. And there's a fire pit on the inside. And there's, of course, the pre-ceremony. And then there's the ceremonies that happen while you're in it. And it's all about essentially going into the mother's womb and being reborn, truly. And while you're in the mother's womb, shedding all of those limiting beliefs and stories that we've held on to. And there's a reoccurring theme through all of these where it's like the four, it's, the elements and the directions and the four doors of the Te Mescal. And we touched base with all of the different elements as well in the Te Mescal, and each element represented, I forget how they align right now. And if you remember, please let me know. But I know like one of the elements was the mother and healing that. The next element was the father and healing that. And the last element was love for yourself and what that looked like. And the first one was, I can't remember.
Setting intention.
Okay.
Yeah, just setting intention for that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every time there would be a door that would close and they would bring the rocks in.
The grandmother rocks.
The grandmother rocks. Diez abuelitas.
Diez abuelitas. That became
each time
a term that every time they said diez abuelitas, I was like, diez? 10 of them? 10 more of abuelitas? Rocks?
Well, so we have this like pre-ceremony before we even go in, and we're all in a circle, and I can't really remember what we did prior when we were outside.
I don't really remember that part either.
I remember. So we go in the swimsuits.
Yes.
And I remember before we go in, there was a hummingbird that flew over us. That was really beautiful. Just like a reminder of this beautiful land that we're on and the connection that we have. And so we go in one by one, and we go into the left and curve around. And we all go in and we bow down and crawl in. And when I was the last or second to last to go in, and you were the first because you wanted to be by the door because you were really scared of needing to leave. Yeah. And so I crawl in and I'm like crawling by you, and I'm like, hey, and I'm like, you're like, whoa, where are you going? I saved you a spot.
Right here, girl, next to me.
And I was like, oh shit, okay, all right. So there's like blankets laid out, and I take my seat next to you, and you are going through it already. You're like panicking. You're like trying to breathe. And I'm like, it's fine. Like, we got this. Breathe. Just touch base, whatever. And then I feel like slowly but surely, like, I'm like, why is she so fearful? So I start getting more fearful. And we're so connected, and I'm such an empath that, like, I naturally am going to take that on. Yeah. And I remember just kind of like, here we go, setting it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking I'm fine. And then the door comes down. And it's not pitch black.
Mm-hmm.
But when that door came down, and mind you, the door was a blanket.
Mm-hmm.
But
like
when,
a traditional Mexican blanket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when that came down, like, I felt tingling in my body.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like this rush of like hot blood. And it wasn't like hot in there yet. And I just was like, I have to get the fuck out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is no way that I'm going to sit in here for 2 hours and it's going to keep getting hotter and hotter. Like, no way. There's no way. I was claustrophobic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to leave. And when I leave out this door, they're going to be like, what happened? And I'm going to need to like figure out what I'm going to do with my life for the next 2 hours. I'm going to feel
like already talking yourself through what's going to happen after you leave because you're leaving. Yeah. You're getting out.
Yeah, I'm leaving. Like, there's no way that I could physically stay in there.
Right.
And I'm like, this is the story that I'm going to have to come up with. I'm going to have to figure out how I preoccupy myself for 2 hours. Like, and then I'm like, okay, no, bitch. Like, this is the point of it.
Yeah.
Like, get back in. And I could not fathom how I was going to be able to do it for 2 hours.
Right.
But I feel like in that moment, I recognized that the fear that I was taking on was a creation in my own mind and yours and maybe others around me.
Right.
And so I've been really learning on how to release that. Like, that is not mine. That is not mine to hold and let it go. And then I look over and I saw you touching the ground.
Yeah, girl.
The cold ground.
I was gripping.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll do that too. And immediately I felt better. And I was like, we're going to do this. We're going through it.
Yeah.
And I was, ready, set, go.
Yeah.
What did you feel?
All I know is I got in that little dome and I was like, speechless of just like, what the fuck is this? How am I going to do this? And let me also say that I am not fearful in any capacity of heat. I take hot yoga classes, multiple of them on a weekly basis. I teach hot yoga classes. I'm no stranger to an infrared sauna. I'm no stranger to any sort of, I live in freaking Texas, it'd be 100 degrees outside and that's just light work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that I have had experiences in claustrophobia before, but that's something also that I've done really well at working on, like most specifically doing like whole body cryo chambers and just existing in that space and doing well with that. So I didn't think that necessarily like my fear of being claustrophobic was still like very prevalent. It didn't feel like that, but I knew that I was fearful. And so I was assuming that the fear was because of being in a claustrophobic space. But also logically, I didn't know how like being in that kind of experience for 2 hours. I remember when we were talking about it and I was like, yeah, I think Sol said 2 hours, but I must have been crazy when she said that. And she must have said like 1 because there's no way she said 2, but she said 2. And that's exactly what we were going to do. So, initially I was just immediately praying like this is like, just like you, I'm like, there's no reason to be fearful right now. Like, I'm not going to die. I'm right by the door. We have these very experienced shaman who, mind you, lead 2 to 3 of those ceremonies, those specifically a week. So I knew that I was in capable hands. I just couldn't really understand why I was so fearful. But I very, very much so was like tapped in and like source, universe, God, angels, spirit guides, spirit teams. I don't know, every single divine light being that's here for me in my highest power. Like I'm here and I'm ready. And like, we just gotta do this because there is something that I'm fearful. So I'm meant to experience this and there's something I'm meant to receive from this experience. Yeah. And so that was initially my trying to be grounded. And it was so beautiful because when I put my hands like on the base, on the floor, the dome, I just immediately felt so grounded. And I immediately felt like, okay, I can do this. And whenever I took my hands away, then that fear would start building up. So I'd keep my hands there and I would just feel just like, I can do this.
Yeah.
And so that's where I stayed for quite some time.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was scary in its moments, the first door. And then when that finished, and the second door, and then doing that. And it wasn't really until the third door that I started really going through it. But is there anything that you'd like to share about your experience in the first and the second and the third and the fourth, or anything else about your experience in that?
Yeah. So we were able to set our intentions, and we would like speak into the water. And then there was, what was it? A copal stone in the water. And we would take it out and press it on one of the hot stones in the fire center. And of course, steam would come up. And we'd announce our intention to every woman. And we would go through every woman. And I thought that was so beautiful because when other women would speak their intention and it resonated, I felt like, yes, like it was
going to happen for all of us.
Yes,
exactly.
And it drew us closer together to know like what we're suffering through and what we're releasing and kind of what our journeys are supposed to be on this retreat. I think the one that I do want to speak to is the mother. And because the one ancestor that is so near and dear to me, in my timeline right now is my grandmother, and who was like my mom. And I lost her when I was, I think, around 7 years old, and she was only like 44. And just like what I weep for and what I miss with that, and my own mother and my connection with her. And then it was like what I hadn't announced to the group was Mother Earth. And every time I connect with Mother Earth, that is so profound, and I feel it inside of me. And that one really took me deep. So I had some work with my mom and my grandmother, and of course, knowing that I needed to be more in touch with my mom because I'm lucky to have her in this life still. And how I haven't like learned my lesson of like life's too short. Like look at my grandmother who died so young, and I need to really cherish all this time that I've had with my mom, and I'm not utilizing that. And so there was going through that, of course, but then it was Mother Earth and how much pain we've done to her and all the injustices and how we just keep taking and taking from her and not just like giving back or I feel like a lot of us just like live in this earth and don't even acknowledge the beauty of her and how like literally every tiny little thing that we have this set here, everything we ingest, it all comes from her. Everything we know. And I just, it really kind of tore me down. And it was a lot of like apologizing to her and connecting into her. And then of course the third door was the father wound or the father rather, not necessarily a wound, but I know that's a huge wound for me. And so, that session for me was really just me praying for the men in my life and all the healing that they need and that they find the healing, and really thinking about how leading men's circles and why that is so important. And so that one was really more just like, I also ache for these men who aren't able to heal and are looking towards, you know, drugs, alcohol, pornography, addiction to phones, sex, all of that, because they don't have that ability to touch into themselves and know to feel and heal. And I talked about that in the last episode. So honestly, for me, it got easier from the door one closing to then Mother and then going further. It became lighter and lighter. I'm like, oh, I'm almost out of here. You know? So that was my overall journey.
Yeah. Well, which is beautiful. And I'm glad that you had that experience. But I'm very appreciative of your connection that you have with Mother Earth and Mother Nature, because it is very beautiful. And it's something unlike a relationship that you have with her that's very different than I think most people do. And I've never known anyone to be so deeply connected to Mother Earth as you. And so the things that you'll say about Mother Nature, I'll connect in with, and I'll say like, yeah, you're right. Like Mother Earth is beautiful. But on this experience in this retreat, like I definitely feel very, very in tune with her medicine and her magic. And it was beautiful to finally be able to see through your eyes what it was that you actually felt this deep, profound connection to. And so I really think it's so beautiful that you were able to have that moment to really connect in and grieve for what's going on this earth right now. And that was what you immediately felt that connection to when we were talking about the mother. For me, my mother is my everything. I love her to bits and pieces. She is the most incredible woman I've ever known in my whole entire life. And I would give up everything for her to have the most beautiful, blessed life. She has been through so much, and she is so deserving of everything that is good in this world. So when we offered up for the mother, I immediately was just like, oh, like that's such a very sensitive space in my heart. I love her so much. And I'm so grateful for her and everything that she's done for me and everything she's given to me. And regardless of how cruel the world has been to her, that she has done nothing but show up every day with love in spite of that. And she is the reason why I am so loving, because I received love from her. And I owe everything about who I am as a person to her specifically. So in that moment was like any healing that I go through in this store, in this space, I want to be for her. If I have the ability to take on any of the things that she's gone through emotionally, energetically, and if I can go through this healing for her and that she feels lighter on the other end of that, I will take on whatever it is. So that second door, I was like, I can get through. Like I had my mom at my heart center. And my grandmother as well, because she's been through some things also. And so, like I said, dating back to the ancestral healing that I knew that I was there to do. When it came to the father, I was like, that man.
I was so curious as to what I was like, because you went first on all the intention settings, I think, except for the last one, because you were laying flat. Exactly. You were like trying to crawl backwards out the damn dome.
Literally.
But yeah, I was like, what is she going to say? Because what she says is truthfully going to determine what I have to say.
Yeah.
And so I was like, whatever energy she brings through, I know is going to like empower me to bring similar energy through. I was not able to, because I know we have a somewhat similar journey with the father.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was like, what's she going to do? Because I'm just going to like piggyback off of that, really.
Yeah. My daddy wasn't there to take me to the fair, to change my underwear. I don't know where that song comes from, but me and my friends sing it all the time because we all have daddy wounds. And it is in that moment that I was like, I was honestly gooped. I was like, my father? Like, this sounds terrible. But I'm like, I didn't come here for him. Like, I didn't come here for
that
him.
man doesn't deserve none of my time.
You know, and it's so unfortunate because, you know, I am working on establishing a relationship with my father, attempting to reestablish a relationship with my father. But, you know, I was there to do some very powerful work. I had very, very strong intentions for this retreat. And I wanted every single piece of my energy to go to the matriarch within my family, because the mothers and the women within my family, like even extended family that I don't necessarily have, you know, consistent communication with, the Washington family lineage is a matriarch, and it is women who hold the foundation of my familial structure. So when I think about who I am and what I'm made out of, I just think about the women in my family. And so when I was thinking about fathers, I'm like, okay, like I will take this moment to share and to tap in. And honestly, I don't even really remember what it was that I shared and what I said. I think it was more so giving myself space to offer him forgiveness. Yeah. And to, you know, respecting that he, you know, was but a child himself. And, you know, he didn't make choices with the intention to hurt or harm me. The choices that he made wore through his lens and the way that he perceived the world, and what it was that he did was what he did.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily good or bad, because I think I'm a better person for not having him in my life. And I'm grateful because my mother really, truly provided me with everything that I needed to, for me to be who I am today. And so, I did take a moment to share that and provide some forgiveness, but really in truth, that wasn't why I was there.
Yeah. It's interesting that you just bring that up. Like he is a child himself.
Yeah.
And we all have our inner child that still is the one that's acting out and whatever, needs healing. And you bringing that up reminds me of a moment in the Temazcal, the father, because we would sit in there for, I don't know how long per each door. But so during that time for the father sitting, I remember having this vision of my father, who I call my father, the man that was there the most.
Because you have a few different father figures in your life, right?
Yeah. I've got my bio dad. I've got several stepdads that have come and gone. Dan's still there. And I've got Brian, who's my sister's bio dad, but has raised me. And he's going through it right now. And it's heartbreaking, to watch your own parent go through it, that you've known to be such a good parent figure your whole life. And then all of a sudden, like something happens and they just go off the deep end, and it's not pretty. And I won't go into details on this episode, but I remember seeing him as a kid, just little redheaded him. And my heart ached for him. And I think that's what helped me touch base into that father figure and praying for the healing that he needs. Just seeing him as a child and knowing that he is where he is right now because of the pain that he's been through. And this is what he's found himself at. And that's how it's acting out and playing out in this world right now for him.
Absolutely.
So that was a profound door for me as well. But I think around that time, the third door is when I started. I mean, by that time, I'm dripping in sweat.
Right.
The Mexican blankets are sopping wet.
Yeah, I got my snot in it.
Oh, yeah. You're blowing your snot in it. Like, I remember, I think I was upside down at that point with, like, legs on the wall.
Yes.
And just, like, touching the ground, like, full. Like, I just feel like I was spinning, like, slowly but surely physically.
Yeah.
In the dome. So, yeah, that's where I was.
Yeah. And that was door number 3. Right? And so preparing for door number 4, as soon as they were like, all right, it's go time, door number 4. And I was like, this is going to get hotter. This is going to get more intense. When I tell you, I literally did not have anything else left within me. And it's so crazy because it's like, we're in this dome, right? If you just think like on a 3D perspective, we're in this hot dome, right? We're in this hot dome. There's rocks, there's steam, and it's hot, right? But for me to have had the experience that I had, and I just remember laying down, like sitting down or laying down at that point, because they were like, you can lay down, you can lay down. I had already done the child's pose. I'd already hands on and they were like, you can lay down, you can lay down. And they were like, lay down. And I was like, okay, I'll lay down. But I just remember just sitting there and like tears coming down my face and being like, this is so hard. This is so hard. Why is this so hard? I didn't understand, like, this is, and I just remember saying, this is so hard. And calling on source, like, however much further I get through this experience is how much I get through. I think I remember right before we started the 4th door, I looked over to you before I lay down and my hands were shaking.
Oh, yeah. Your whole body, like, you were a weak, trembling shell.
Yeah.
Like, you were done.
Yeah.
And I'm laughing because I have the visual of you crawling out.
I know we should figure out how to tag that in the video in the end credits so that you guys can see, because we had mud slathered all over us.
By the end,
we were sweating and I was shaking and I was like, Tiffany, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. And then I laid back and I started praying and then there was this moment that it felt as though every single cell in my body lit up, activated, and started vibrating. And when I say this, I don't mean that my hands started trembling. I don't mean that I started feeling like I was twitching, that my body was moving in any capacity. It was what was within me on a cellular level. Like, consider like a bunch of different cells that are existing, all the cells that make up our body, every single one of those vibrating, pulsating in some way. And I felt it from the tips of my toes all the way up through my body, in my lips. And when my lips weren't shaking and my lips felt that that vibration, I was like, okay, yeah, this is not me shaking. This is really me feeling this experience all the way through. And then next thing you know, the feeling stopped and it was over. The ceremony was done.
And we crawled out. Well, we slathered ourselves in clay, which I love. Getting my body in mud.
We got all muddy.
Yeah, and then we crawled our way out. We were reborn.
Renasco!
Reborn from the mother womb and came out, and we went to the beautiful cenotes, which if you don't know what a cenote is, it is a natural body of water, like a smaller lake. There's different sizes, but they're in caves, or they have caves underground or under the water. And there's bats and beautiful animals all around and lush greenery. And it's usually so clear and like turquoise waters. Ooh, girl, I love it so much. And we just went to the closest nearby one to cleanse ourselves officially and be with the bats and the fishies and really just be reborn and cleanse off everything that we had released from that temazcal.
Yeah. I'm like as we're having this conversation, like going back and visualizing and being in that, and that the cleansing piece after was very beautiful, but I just remember just not I just like I felt like I had just been through something.
Oh yeah, and you had.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't know what it was that I was going through, but like I went through something, and so trying to still like tap into like my own funny, bubbly energy, like have a good time. Like I felt like I was like still feeling like, you know, a slight connection to that, but really like my everything else was like over here in this experience. So I remember when we went back to the room, I showered immediately because, you know, I don't like to get my hair wet, but I did for the experience.
Oh, yeah. And you were, your dress was dripping.
It was dripping, honey. So I said, let me go on and wash this head of mine. And I immediately like journaled and wrote down like just a whole bunch of stuff. And at the very end of the journaling, just like sitting there and feeling like, I feel like there is something that exists within me that I'm not cognizant of right now. And I remember writing specifically that I pray that if there is any sort of like spiritual gift that's connected to me, that I would become awakened and aware of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that puts us about halfway through the retreat.
Yeah.
Because we still had Saturday night and Sunday and Monday morning. And lots of modalities, but also a lot of outside activity that happened not in the modalities.
Well, that is just going to be part one of this experience. And so there's a lot more that we get into. There's a lot more that happened. And in order for us to be able to really flesh it all out, we want to ensure that we do a service to the experience. So if you're interested in listening to more, there's more to come.
Stay tuned for, I guess we'll do part 2 of episode 5.
Yes, part 2, episode 5 of the Wooed Up podcast. Once again, my name is Kayla.
And my name is Tiffany.
And we want to thank you guys so much for watching. And we will see you
on the other side.
On the other side,
but
honey.
in the 3D.
We'll
stay in the 3D.
But,
maybe.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Bye.
Bye.